Welcome to Go Learning Point tutorial. So in this session we'll discuss about what is with clause in Oracle. This is the most common interview question as well, and this can also be asked at what is CTE in Oracle. The CTE stands for Common Table Expression, and this can also be asked as how with clause helps in simplifying the complex SQL. So we'll discuss all the aspects around with clause in Oracle. So consider a situation where you want to get the data from external sources, want to transform that data, and then want to insert that data into your database. So what you're going to do for the transformation purpose, you're going to store that data, whatever data is coming from the external sources, into some temporary table or into some staging tables. And once that data from external sources is there in the staging table, from the staging table you're going to transform that to your database, right? And once that purpose is done, you're going to truncate those staging tables from the database, right? So with clause also works in a similar way. It creates kind of a temporary table or inline view that you would be using in your select statement multiple times. So whenever you want to use the same set of reference, same set of result set in your select statement, you'll go for the with clause. So it's kind of a temporary table or inline view. So in short, Oracle with clause is an inline view or a temporary tables where you store the data once, read it multiple times in your final query, and once your query is executed, that data will not be there, will not be persisted in the database. Now when I say that you have to read it multiple times in your SQL query, that means you will be creating a kind of a subquery that you will be using in your final query multiple times, right? So this particular subquery will be used as an inline view or as a temporary table. And this particular subquery is what we call as CTE, that is Common Table Expression. Okay, so Oracle with clause is used when a subquery is executed multiple times, and this subquery is what is our common table expression. Okay, and that subquery will be used as an inline view or a temporary table. Now, when we say that we have reduced the multiple references of the same query and we have targeted that into a subquery, and that subquery will be used multiple times in our final query, that means you have already simplified your SQL query, right? Instead of writing the same set of code multiple times in your final query, you have written a subquery inside the with clause that is termed as common table expression, and then that CTE will be used throughout your final query multiple times. So therefore using the with clause will also have an impact on the performance of your SQL query. So as a summary, when with clause will be best used in your Oracle query is when the result of your with clause or your CTE will be used more than once in your final query, right? So let's take an example of that you want to calculate the average of the department, whatever the department and whatever the employees we have in those departments. You want to calculate the average salary in each of the department, and that result set you want to use multiple times in your final query. So in such cases, with clause will be very helpful and will be performance wise will be the best option in Oracle. Okay. So with clause is the best use when the result of with query is required more than once in the final query or the body of your final query. Now, this is the syntax of a simple with clause query. Here, these queries will always start with this with keyword. Then you'll have to give alias here. You can give as ct1, 2, 3, or whatever you want. And as here will be your subquery that will be used as a common table expression or as a result for this particular alias. This will become my, whatever the alias we have given, that will become my temporary table or inline view that I can use in my final query. So this is my final query, and this is the with clause, and this is my common table expression. Okay, now this alias I have used in my final query, and I can also use other tables that I will be joining in this particular alias or particular inline view or particular temporary table, right? So I can add multiple tables here, and then I can simply write as the usual query. We have to give the join condition here that this particular C1 equal to whatever the alias you have given and the common column of that particular alias. So what with clause does, with clause lets you assign a name to a subquery that will become my temporary table and will be used throughout my final query. So thereby, whenever we want to refer this particular result set multiple times in my query, I'll be using a with clause to improve the performance of my overall SQL query. So this alias is just kind of a name I have assigned to my common table expression result set. So with query name, that is my CTE name, is kind of a clause that lets you assign a name to a subquery block, and then you can refer that subquery block or an inline view or a temporary table multiple times in your final query. So thereby Oracle will optimize the query by treating that particular query name that you have assigned in the with clause as an inline view or a temporary table. So it will not be processed time and again you are referring to that particular result set. Now let's talk about the advantages of using with clause. So one of the advantages of using with clause is the subquery factoring feature of this with clause. What it does basically, it assigns a name to the subquery result set, and then that subquery result set will be used multiple times in my final query. So Oracle needs to execute that particular query once, and the result will be used throughout the final query, right? So it basically creates a subquery, and that will be fired only once, that will be executed only once in the SQL engine, and result set will be used multiple times in my query. So thereby it improves the performance, it improves, it also enhances the code readability, right? So one of the advantages is code readability. So it basically enhances the code readability. Second would be its subquery factoring that we have discussed, and third one would be the multiple references of the same table in the query can be reduced by using with clause. So that means only a single hit will go to the database or will go to the Oracle engine or SQL engine. So once that hit is there, once that particular SQL statement is executed in the SQL engine, that will not be executed multiple times. Only the result set will be used throughout the final query. If we are used n number of times, the result set of that particular query, it will be executed only once in the SQL engine. So in our next session, we will see how with clause works practically in Oracle. Thanks for watching my tutorial, and like, share and subscribe to get more updates.